How long is it today? Not too long. Pretty short, actually. About 10 minutes worth. Okay. The first aliyah of the parsha of this week is Parshas Kiseitze. And it comes in the verse, it says, Kiseitze lamocham alebecha. When you go out to war against your enemies, Hashem your God will give them over into your hand, and you will capture captives from them. When you go out to war. The verse is discussing an optional war. For in the war to conquer the land of Israel, you can't say you'll capture a captive, because we know by that unique part of history, they were not allowed to let anybody live of the 7 Canaanite nations. There is a argument. This is Rashi's opinion. Rashi held that one time in history, God said, to reclaim the land of Israel as promised to Abraham, and to let none of the pagan Canaanite nations survive. However, I was reading a little bit about this yesterday. A lot of other big rabbinic commentators, no less than the Rambam, Maimonides, held that even the 7 Canaanite nations, initially, they were offered peace. That if they will pack up and go, or agree to live under the jurisdiction of the monotheistic Jewish people, they will not be. They would not kill them. But Rashi did held you had to that one time original war was a fight to reclaim the land and not allow any of the pagan survivors to stick around to influence the land. So I'm just point that out. But here we're talking about in this scenario. So I'm just Rashi saying this is talking about so when it tells you the laws of capturing somebody, that's in most wars, which are wars they're optional. A war of optional would be, for example, when King David annexed some lands from the Jews' enemies. He didn't have to, it's optional. It's an optional war, and you're going to capture a captive. Says Rashi, you capture captives from them. This includes Canaanites whom you find among them, even if they are from the 7 nations. So let's say it's an optional war, and let's say this next door land, I don't know, that you're conquering, optional annexing, there was some of the original 7, bad nations, some people were living there. You don't have to kill them if they're not living in the Israel proper. You can just capture them and conquer them. Okay. Now this is the next verse, Yud Aleph. Re'isa bashivya eshes yivas tayir. And you, the soldier, will see among the captives a beautiful-looking woman, and you desire her, and want to take her for yourself as a wife. Eshes, says Rashi, it says, even if she was married once in war, the laws are that all previous relations of marriage among those nations are off, and it's like she's unmarried. She's allowed to be taken as a wife. Just reading them. So that was, I guess, the convention of war back then.
Rabbi, was that your battery?
I have enough time, I think. Yeah, I want to get the cables on my thing. Okay, thank you. You take her for love as a wife. Now, it's saying, it sounds very brutal, right? It sounds very savage. Soldiers can forcibly take a woman. So the reality is, back then, let's finish talking about the thing, and then we'll then we'll discuss it. The Torah is saying in war where adrenaline and survival is rushing high and the soldier, as normal, not unfortunately, as happens many times, soldiers, that they just rape the local women. So the Torah basically didn't say you can't do it 100% because then no one would listen. In a time of the red-blooded adrenaline, like people are just, there's the craziness of war, and people won't be able to control their impulse. So therefore, the Torah basically legislates, you want to take her as a wife? You could with like a ton of restrictions. When you know that you're ultimately allowed to, even if there's like a protocol, it cools down the desire. Because ultimately, the Torah is going to say in the next few verses that if you do this, it's not going to be a great marriage. And it predicts that you're going to hate her. And then it talks about the laws, the juxtaposed laws of if a man hates his wife, implying that this is not an optimal marriage. We're going to allow it in like worst case scenario. We're going to restrict it a ton, first of all, make it not as appealing, just to give yourself that allowance so you won't just neglect, all decency and just do rape. But if you do so, this is not optimal. You might end up having a bad marriage, won't like her. And then you might even have a son who's rebellious from this, a rebellious son. Therefore, all these mitzvahs in the next 10 verses are juxtaposed because one leads to the next. Yud Beis. You shall bring them you bring her into your house. So what do you want to do? So Torah is saying, yes, you want to marry this beautiful captive? You could, but you got to bring her into your house. And you have to shave the hair of her head to make it less appealing, right? And let her nails grow. Says Rashi, let her nails grow long that she doesn't look so beautiful. It's unattractive. Continues, Yud Gimel. She shall remove the clothing of her captivity. She'll sit in your house. And she'll cry for the loss of her family in the war for a month. After that, then you can be intimate with her. She could be your wife. Rashi. She'll remove the clothing of her captivity. Why remove the clothing? You replace it with more plain clothing because it says actually interesting that this was normal back then, that the women folk of those nations would, it's hard for us to imagine, but they dress up in war to seduce enemy soldiers. So the Torah is saying, don't fall to the trap. You have to see somebody who they really are. Let her sit in your house for a month, in the house that your regular living quarters. So when you come in, you'll see her, and when you go out, you'll see her, and then that like initial attraction will dissipate, and you'll see her crying. You'll see her not as attractive clothes and long nails and all that, and ultimately it's going to take away the desire. And she'll weep for her father, says Rashi. Why does she weep for her? Why do you do all this to her? Like, why are we allowing her to mourn for idol worshiping parents? Like, they were bad people. So it's to dissuade the soldier from carrying through with this, so that he'll see that a Jewish woman is happy and composed, and this woman that you're so attracted to is really, is weeping and not so attractive. Yodalid, but it will be then, if you don't want to keep her, you have to send her away to do as she wishes. You cannot sell her. It's saying that the idea of taking a slave in war was a very normal thing. But you were trying to see if you want to marry this one. Marriage is not slavery. And you decide you're not going to marry. Okay, she gets something out of this. She gets to go free and not be A, you don't want to marry her. B, you can't keep her and sell her as a slave, which was a normal thing back then. You must not sell her because you can't sell her for any money. You can't use her as a slave. You can't keep her in your house as a cleaning lady. Since you had relations with her. Rashi. The Torah is actually predicting, ultimately, you're not going to like her. Again, this is not an ideal situation. So let's calm your impulses down. Let's be patient. And let's see what you really want after a month. I need an Uzdan edition. Thank you. Just to know says Rashi, you must not use her as a slave. The word in Persian, slavery and servitude are called imra'ah. Imra'ah, that's why the Torah, which sometimes uses words that are found in other languages, is tisamer. Okay, so just so you get what's going on here, according to Rashi, I'd love to hear from everybody. Does this sound barbaric or not? This whole procedure. Instead of allowing...
I think it's very smart. I think it's
very smart, right?
Because if you look at the wars, look what Russians did in Germany. They came in and they raped millions of women.
Wow.
They left behind children.
Wow.
Look what Arabs do.
Right.
When they do war. It's horrible. This is actually, morality of how you wage the war.
Right. It's saying, and ultimately the Torah is dissuading it, but it's not saying you can't, because you're not going to listen in an adrenaline time of war.
Yeah.
So we say,
war is war.
You want to marry her, you want to be with her. Okay. Here's the procedure. Take her home. Do not touch her. Don't molest her. Take her home. Take away her beautiful clothing. Make her look more regular. Let her do her more natural mourning. And let's see if you really want her after a month after that. Even then, the Torah is saying, it's not a good idea. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, historically, King David had a few wives. Many kings had many wives. And one of those wives was a woman of a Isha Yafas Torah, of this in a wartime, that he saw a certain woman and he wanted to marry her, and he did the whole procedure, and he went through it and he married her. And the son from that was Absalom, who ended up being a rebel against his father. Tried to kill his father and lead the troops against his father. Wasn't successful. But that's just, it's not a good idea. It's not an ideal idea. Okay. Now the Torah goes on to the next, it segues to the next mitzvah, Tesvav. Kisiyena li'ish teinoshim. If a man has two wives, again, according to biblical law, the polygamy was allowed. It wasn't recommended, but it was allowed. It was a norm back then. Achas hahuva achas nu, and one is loved, one is hated. V'yoduloi vanim, and they bear him sons. Hahuva v'asnua, the loved one and the hated one. V'hoya ben abachar lasnia, and the firstborn son is from the hated wife. Okay, next on to the next item on the agenda. So you have sons from both wives, and it happens to be your first child, son, was from the hated wife, the unloved wife. Yudzayin, ki es habachar ben asnua, Rather, he shall recognize. So yakir lasis lepishnayim. You cannot say, "Well, I like the love." The other. Oh, look who just mows it into the corral, the saloon. Okay, you can join if you'd like, or you can as you wish. You can't say, "Well, I love this wife and I want her son to be my honorary firstborn and get the double portion." No, firstborn is the firstborn, even if it's from the less loved child, wife, whatever. You got to give him the double portion. Whatever, by giving me a double portion in everything that you own after passing. Kihu reishis ainai, for he is the first child of your virility. Loi mishpat abachera, he has the rights of the firstborn, irrelevant of who his mother was. Pishnayim, the term pishnayim means a double portion. In other words, that corresponds to 2 portions of regular brothers. In other words, let's say there's 4 sons, right? And one's the oldest. You basically would say, imagine there was a 5th son. And the Bechor, the firstborn, would get his regular portion plus this imaginary portion of the 5th son. That's a double portion. Everything that he owns. From here we learn that the firstborn does not take a double portion in that which he is to accrue to the estate after the father's death, as he does in what the father already had in his possession. So basically it's saying, let's say the father has an estate that's worth $1 million, but it's invested, right? Let's say it's in the vineyards. And after the father dies, before they settle up all the accounts, a month goes by, and then his property is $1.1 million, right? That 0.1 that came after death, that was kind of, return on investment, the first one does not get a double portion of that. It's only at the time of death. What are the assets? He gets a double portion of the time of death assets. Yud Ches. Now we segue to the next mitzvah about the wayward son. If a man has a wayward and rebellious son, who does not heed the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and they discipline him, but he still does not listen to them. We're going to learn this is a very, very specific, almost impossible case. But it's kind of a paradigm type case. But it's not like any rebellious kid you get to, get rid of. It's a very, very specific. So we're saying that you have a rebellious son who doesn't live to the father and mother, and they discipline him, but he still doesn't listen. Let's see what Rashi says. Seirer, unusual word alert. Rashi's one seirer. Sar min haderech, it means he's deviated, a deviant son. Deviated from the path. Moira, seirer umeira, he's strayed from the path of being an upstanding citizen. He's also rebellious. He's not listening to his father telling him to stop straying from the path of a decent citizen. This is the term we find a similar term when Moshe called the Jews mamrim. You are mamrim, you rebellious ones. V'yisroi soy. V'yisro means they warn him in front of 3 judges and give him lashes. So it's not like my kid's being rebellious, knock him off. No. First, you bring him the kids doing certain things, and there's certain things has to be very specific criteria. But then he has to go to court. You tell them a court, the parents, they say, we don't know what to do. He's doing X, Y, and Z in front of court. And the court says, there's witnesses, you get lashes. Okay. Oh, so here now Rashi qualifies. Oh, this specific case of a ben soirer or moira, a wayward, rebellious son, is one who is not. He'd have to steal and eat a tartamer. A tartamer is a half mana, 240 grams of meat. And he has to eat it half cooked, the way of thieves. They grab me and they eat it like half cooked. And he has to steal and drink half a leg of wine. Imagine the pirates with the chicken leg, you know what I'm saying, and the flasks of wine, right? He's doing that type of thing. And again, so the procedure of this kid is he's doing this stealing stuff, and he's disciplined. They don't listen. They go to court, and the court says stop it, and they give him lashes for not continuing for doing this behavior. After that, he continues again, and he does the same thing. And then it's going to say, we'll see soon, that if he still doesn't listen, then he gets killed. Also, he has to be, I believe, 13 years old, like between 13 and 13 and a half. Like after the first 6 months of puberty, he can't, even if he's 14, he's a thief. You don't do this to him. A wayward and rebellious son is killed on account of what will happen to him in the end. Basically, this 13 to 13 and a half year old deviant, rebellious, thieving son is seen to be a pathological danger to society, and he's going to grow up and become killed people because he's not stopping. And so the Torah says better he should die an innocent life, before he kills people. He should. This should raise the alarm bells by all of us, but we'll get to it. The Torah is telling you this is going to happen to him. In the end, he's going to stop stealing from his parents. He's going to start stealing from people, and he'll kill people to get money on the highway, bandit. The Torah says better he should die now innocent, relatively innocent, and not die as a murderer. Okay. So let's just finish the verses and we'll talk about this a little bit. Chav, Amrul Zikna Irei Bnei Zeser Meir. They come after he doesn't listen, he gets the lashes, he come back. They go to the elders of the city and they say in verse Chav in 20, this kid is a wayward and rebellious son. He does not heed our voice. And Enu Shomea B'Kalenu, Zoylo V'Seva, he's a glutton for meat and a drunkard of wine. Chafal of 21, Urgamu Klan She'irei Bavanim, all the men of the city shall then stone him so that he dies. Uviarter Mikirbecha, and you shall eradicate the perpetrator of evil from among you. Chol Yisrael Yishmiro, and all of Israel shall hear about it and be afraid. People will take heed. Rashi says, all of Israel hear and be afraid. From here we learn that this unique case of the wayward son, has to be publicly declared what the verdict is. So-and-so, this child is being stoned since he's a wayward and rebellious son. It's one of 4 cases where this proclamation by a capital punishment. Or any punishment. Okay, the obvious question is, there's a lot of qualifications. I only said some of them. Can't be chicken, by the way. It has to be mammal, cow meat, whatever. The point is, this is almost impossible for this to ever happen. As indeed, I think in the Gemara, there's an opinion that this never actually happened because you have to be 13 to 13 and a half. It's not like any petty crime or any juvenile delinquent is in the category. It's like a very, very specific situation. Then if it's impossible to happen, that some say never happened, and why is the Torah telling? Why is the Torah forewarning you about a hypothetical that never happened? Right? Yeah. So the answer is that indeed some of the commandments and threats recorded in the Torah are there largely or even solely for preventative purposes. In other words, they're precisely there to ensure that the situation would never occur. That is